Yeah, these
There's
chapters were a lot, and it was
yeah.
mostly because of the May stuff towards the end, but like,
Yeah. Before we do that,
yeah.
since we don't have another
Oh,
thing this
yeah.
week, I want to just mention things that are just like going on generally.
Oh, yeah.
Um, I with Percy Jackson stuff, but still, Disney announced that they're doing a video podcast that is going to be like a companion podcast to actual like the actual show. And so they're doing it with Percy Jackson and other shows. But basically when every episode comes out, they're going to do like they have a video podcast with a host, whoever that is. It's not Rick, but other than that we don't know who it is yet.
Yeah.
Of them interviewing like the cast and stuff like that about whatever episode came out. And so everyone's making lots of jokes about how they're copying us because it's going to be like on YouTube and everything else, like every other person that does a podcast like that, except that they're interviewing the most important people.
Yeah.
And so that'll be fun to watch like every week when the new episodes come out in December and probably some in January. Um, there's this one article that came out where they said like some things about a season two. The most important thing is that they said that they're talking about the prophecy in season two instead of in season five. And so in season two, they're going to be already telling Percy about how he's supposed to get his soul reaped
Oh, wow.
and and other things like that. And they talk about it in this article as like something that helps set up like some of the responses that some of the other kids have. And the thing I thought of was that having it be like out there that there's like a prophecy about one of the big three kids, you know, getting stabbed to death as like a way to seemingly like save everybody. I could see how they could introduce that early to make Bianca joining the hunters a little bit more like empathetic, I guess. Like understanding more of her perspective because that is one thing that sometimes people get upset with her. Even when we were reading, we were like, "What the heck?"
I mean, but she didn't know she was a daughter of the big three. That's the thing.
Yeah, but still, like because they're giving more like her a lot more agency and stuff.
Hmm.
I could see like that being because they did mention that it's something that I honestly can't remember if they said this in this article or if Becky just said it. One of those people said it somewhere that it like also affects the younger kids like Nico and Bianca in season three, and so it's a good idea to just introduce it now. And you know they didn't say like how, and I don't want them to tell us how. That's the point of watching the show. But it's just like the overall idea that they're introducing it now will make things progress in just a slightly different way than the books. Like he already gets introduced to it somewhat in the second book, but I'm honestly fine with him knowing about it earlier on because it's interesting to think like the different ways that people would respond to things when because he knows about it the entire time. But the Lord, the one thing they talked about in this article though that I had to like talk about for a second just because of everything is they're talking about like how in season two they say specifically that Luke is a lot like further along. He's a lot more like I forget the word they used, but just further along in season two than people might be expecting. And
Hmm.
so they're talking about how they're showing like why Annabeth has a hard time letting go of him. And that's kind of the point of the flashbacks is to show like why despite how crazy he's being in this season and further seasons, why she still can't let go of him.
Hmm.
But the thing that Walker actually said about Percy that I have to like just give a counterpoint because I don't even know. I just have to. Is he was saying that Percy, he is loyal to a fault. He'd burn the world down for one of his friends just to save them. And he says Percy doesn't see Annabeth do that for him in response to Luke's treachery, so does she really care? And they're saying like Annabeth is somebody that wants to like fix everything, but she can't fix what's going on with Luke. And like I'm aware that they have to introduce this sort of thing with Annabeth, like you need to show like what she's actually going through in order to make it understandable so that there aren't people watching the show like, what the heck is wrong with her? Because that would turn into like a bad time overall for everybody very, very quickly with Leah playing Annabeth especially. It
Yeah.
would be crazy. But I just have to say, like, that sentence, I could not disagree with it physically possibly more. That Percy is loyal to a fault, or just the idea of like he'd burn the world down for one of his friends just to save him, and the idea of being like, oh, he's so loyal to the people around him that he doesn't understand why Annabeth isn't loyal to him. I just need to make the overall point that the bare minimum that children are going through abuse should receive from people is them actually giving a fuck.
Hmm.
Like, period. Like, we don't get that. Like, it's like we don't get it at all. Like, we don't. No one ever gets that. Like, it's very rare for somebody to actually have the response that you would want them to. There's a lot of like societal reasons, there's a lot of like denial, there's a lot of reasons that aren't like that person is a monster. Like, Annabeth isn't a monster.
Yeah.
But Percy isn't like this overly loyal person because he expects people to care when he tells them, like, Lucas tried to kill me 2 times by the beginning of Sea of Monsters, much less whatever happens during that season. That is like the bare minimum that you should get from people, that when somebody is trying to kill you or hurt you, that they care, and that happening to you makes them change how they feel about that other person without something else having to happen to them personally to get them to change their mind. But
Yeah.
like, that's not how any of that stuff ever works. It's not. Like, that's
Yeah.
never how it works, but it should be. And like, showing like Percy being somebody that's going through it and that stuff happening to him and being like, what is wrong? I thought you guys cared about me, but nobody cares about me enough to for this to like actually matter. You can feel that and also understand that Annabeth is like trying to hang on to this person that meant a lot to her in the past, and she doesn't realize like what she's really doing in that situation with Percy. You can realize those things at the same time. And I just like need to put that out there because, and no, Percy is not too loyal. It's not a fault that he expects that from people, because that's quite literally what you should expect from anybody. Like, that's what anyone should be doing. If you realize that somebody's being hurt, you should care and do something about it before it directly affects you. Nobody does that, especially with like kids, but you should do it.
Yeah.
If it's not happening, it's not because there's something wrong with you. Um Reading this article made me realize, like, wow, this is what Becky was talking about when she talked about how to us, like, oh yeah, being in the writers room is really triggering. And I was like, yeah, I cannot imagine listening to a bunch of writers watching the show asking me to explain why Percy is so loyal or like expects these things from people. And it's like, because that's how it is when you're abused as a child. Like, you want people to like notice what's going on with you and then follow through. Like, I did a post about it saying like, this is why we spend 10 years on average in therapy.
Hmm.
Because yeah, like when somebody sees what's going on with you and they see that something wrong is happening but it doesn't make them change their minds, it gives you the opinion that you don't matter, and
Yeah.
that what is happening to you, even if it's really upset to you, doesn't matter that much to anyone else, so it can't actually be that bad. That's quite literally where all of the like problems come from. It's just from that one idea. And so it does just always grate on me that people just accept that idea that like, oh, Percy's too loyal because he expects people to like give a fuck about people doing these horrible things to him, and it's a fault of his that he expects that from other people. And I'm like, I'm pretty sure there's nothing wrong with that. Jesus Christ. And it's just the idea that like you're supposed to like be more conflicted about that. You're not supposed to just accept that as a truth and just like move on with your day. Like, Athena is not a reliable source. Why do people believe this so easily? She hates Percy. Like, the sentence before she says that, she's telling her to stay away from her daughter.
Yeah.
Like, right after he just saved her life, and she's like, get away from her. You have bad cooties. And so I really don't think that she's somebody that you should really like trust when it comes to these things. But people just do anyway, and it just drives me insane. And I honestly don't blame Walker for that. He's a child. Like, he wouldn't know that, but I'm not anymore.
Yeah.
And so I can say that just definitively, Jesus Christ. I can't, like, I was just picturing, like, hearing, like, I was, like, picturing what it would be like for people like Rick and Becky to hear, like, writers talking about things like that. Of, like, oh yeah, why does he care so much about other people? And not, like, having the biggest, like, trigger moment of your entire life. Because that is the
Yeah.
biggest, like, there are big ones. That is the biggest one. I got upset and cried after I read this article because it just made me remember all of those years that I was like, everyone can tell that something is wrong and nobody is doing anything. Like, why doesn't nobody care? Why doesn't, like, my dad's family care? Why don't all my teachers care? Why does everybody in the world not care? Even including the police. Why don't they care? They're driving by my house all the time because they're that scared of my dad. Why don't they actually do something? And it's just, I don't like thinking about that, but that's what that stuff reminds you of. And it's just, I'm not sure that any amount of therapy can fully, like, get that out of you to just have that reaction to
Yeah.
that sort of thing. Anyway, that's, like, the main stuff that's going on. That's the only thing I can think of that's happening currently in, like, fandom stuff. Oh, and Becky posted that if you live in the UK, that the dates for Rick doing his book tour there. And I guess one point to make about that is that she said that his, like, post mentioned something about not Camp Half Blood, Camp Jupiter merch, which they've never done before.
Hmm.
And some of his posts are definitely done by, like, a social media manager. Like, the social media manager people are the ones that just post everything. He writes some of
Yeah.
them, but they post them. And so she was like, I don't know what that means. Let me look into that because I have no idea what they're talking about. And I was like, oh, that's always fun when Disney is, like, posting stuff and doing things and they have no idea. I guess keep tabs on her threads just to see if she figures out what the heck they're talking about when they're talking about Camp Jupiter merch, because
Yeah.
none of that has existed so far.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah.
Whatever. Anyway, go into these chapters of
Yeah, so
fun.
these chapters, yeah, the fun begins with Charlie's funeral, with Beckendorf's funeral.
Yeah.
And then it goes to we meet May Castellan. So, like, very heavy chapters all around,
Mm-hmm.
like bookwormed with heavy plot points. But we open on a dream that Percy's having about Rachel. And he sees Rachel up in her room at like 3 a.m., throwing a fit and like basically throwing knives at a painting that she drew of him. And it's a
Mm-hmm.
painting from like Battle of the Labyrinth, him wrestling Antaeus.
Yeah. She's not happy about the fact that he's not going on the trip.
Yeah, well, not only that, he kind of just disappeared, and of course, like, because this is like there's a bunch of lore drops that happen in these chapters, so we find out the cell phone thing, like cell phones are extremely dangerous for
Mm-hmm.
demigods, that they like basically are monster beacons.
Mm-hmm.
And so he hasn't contacted her at all since he took off and she was left in Paul's car with hoof prints on it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So of course she's mad. It's both like of course he's off doing something important and she hasn't heard from him, and like what the fuck,
Yeah.
right? Yeah, so a couple things that stuck out to me about his description of the dream. So he knew it was her room, which means that they've been hanging out enough that he's like been to her house, and he even
The
mentions
room.
like her dad. Yeah, her, because it's like basically a loft. Is like it's not a room, it's the entire upstairs of the mansion, it seems like. And he says it's twice as big as his mom's apartment. We know he's been going often also because he mentions that Rachel's dad calls him your friend or young man and not by name.
Mm-hmm.
And he asks her, like, is your friend going? And she's like, obviously not, dad. Like painting. Um, Percy does not like this depiction of himself, is
No.
something we find out. And this is something that Shannon made a video about, like, was it last week? A few days ago, about Percy not liking being scary. It was like a podcast clip of ours.
Mm-hmm.
And he doesn't like this depiction of himself in this battle against Antaeus because he says it was hard to tell if I was the good guy or the bad guy, but Rachel said I'd look just like that after the battle. So he feels like he looks too fierce and like it's,
Scary.
yeah.
I said scary because he says he looks scary, and the fandom at large talks about him as looking as being scary.
Hmm.
And I just want people to like think in those moments that these chapters made me feel really smart about saying all of that because I know certain things that happen in this book, but I don't even remember when they happen. I just know
Yeah.
that certain things do happen besides like the obvious, like the ending. But other than that, I don't remember when anything actually takes place. And so I didn't remember any of that when I was talking about that stuff, about him being on. At the time, I was talking about when he was on the Princess Andromeda and trying to fight Luke, but being terrified about it and not wanting to do any of this stuff. And trying to give the demigods time to get off the ship, even though they like aren't on his side and kind of probably hate him in that moment. He doesn't care. But that is just these chapters prove that point like over and over and over, and I was just like, okay, yeah, I am smart. Thanks about this kind of stuff because it's like, yeah, he hates it. It scares him to
Hmm.
imagine like looking like that. It doesn't feel like it's him. Um
Yeah, I
and
mean,
it's
we were in his head for that battle. He was not confident the
he was
entire time.
scared. And
Yeah.
like the thing about that, why I like to bring it up is that that is something that happens when you're him like in abusive situations especially and just kind of used to it since you're a kid, is that you get really good at, especially like the scapegoated sort of role, you get really good at like acting, not showing what's going on the outside to a point that's kind of scary, I think, to other people that you're so good at hiding that stuff. Like,
Hmm.
I remember the time when I realized how good I was at that stuff. Like, I became extremely good at that, very, very, like, very young, of being terrified and but not letting anybody like see how scared I actually was because that wasn't an option. Like I had to be the one like that because if I was losing it, then everything else was going to turn into even more chaos than normal. Is we can look like we're fine on the outside because we're like losing it on the inside, but we've learned to just kind of suppress all that stuff. And what I was saying, ranting about before, about people should react to like how Percy feels about these things that are going on with Luke, that's the natural circumstance of that sort of thing. If you tell people Luke tried to like fling me into hell, and then when I got home he tried to kill me again, and then he tried to kill me again when we were out in the Sea of Monsters, and he tried to kill me again in Titan's Curse, and again in Battle of the Labyrinth, and nobody seems to have the response that you want, then you just stop telling people when you're scared and you stop taking it seriously because they obviously don't care. And so if you are afraid, you're never going to tell anybody because you've tried many times but nobody's responded to it. And so you're just like, yeah, this doesn't matter. So I'm still going to be terrified, but I'm just going to hide it all from everybody because it obviously doesn't matter to other people, so why bother telling them? And that's how you suppress like every single thing you ever feel to the point that you don't feel anything anymore because everything is just like shoved somewhere inside until you like lose it one day. But that's like that this kind of stuff with Percy very very early on in this book is he's just like, what am I doing?
Hmm.
And even up to this little part of looking at him being afraid of what he looks like, I just really identify with that because sometimes people say stuff like that to me and I'm like, how could I ever be scary? Like, have you met me before? Like, that's like legitimately what I think. Like, why would anybody be afraid of anything that I've ever said or done or whatever? How could I be scary? I'm not scary. I'm the least scary person, and that's like how he feels because he just will never see himself that way.
Yeah.
And it just is weird to see like the fandom like celebrating that, I guess. And I'm like, I don't know. I always just feel weird seeing them be really excited about how scary he is
Yeah.
because I'm like, but he really doesn't want to be. Um,
Exactly. Um, so, Rachel's dad comes in. He asks her about, like, so your friend's not coming, and she says, like, duh, like it's the day before. So
yeah.
we find out that we're at that part of the timeline. Also, I caught that her dad said, "Are you still having bad dreams?" He asked,
Mm-hmm.
headaches. And Rachel says she threw her darts at the floor. I should have never told you about that. And he says, I'm your father. I'm worried about you, worried about the family's reputation. And he said, Percy kind of remarks to himself, her father didn't react, maybe because he'd heard that comment before, or maybe because it was true.
Maybe
Um,
both.
yeah, maybe both. But the dreams and the headaches, of course, is supposed to, I think, immediately let you on that something's going on with her. And then this only gets further confirmed, like, the more we get into the dream, because
Mm-hmm.
um, she ends up after after her dad leaves, she starts kind of talking to herself, like, I hope these are just dreams. And she unveils the paintings that she has in her little, like, loft studio area. And she has a painting that looks like a very, very young Luke. Percy
Mm-hmm.
says, um, from what I knew about Luke's life, which wasn't much, the picture showed him just before he found out he was a half-blood and had to run away from home. And he knows that like even though Percy himself has never seen like a picture that looks like this of Luke, he's like it looks scarily accurate for it to just come from nowhere for Rachel.
Mm-hmm.
And then the other portrait she shows is a it's a cityscape. It's like just starting to be drawn. Was this the one that she Yeah, this is the one that's still in charcoal, right?
Mm-hmm. Of New
Um,
York City.
yeah, and so it shows the Empire State Building with lightning all around it. In the distance, a dark storm cloud was brewing with a huge hand coming out of the clouds. At the base of the building was a crowd, at the base of a building, a crowd had gathered, but it wasn't a normal crowd of tourists and pedestrians. I saw spears, javelins, and banners, the trappings of an army. And then she talks to Percy in her dream. Percy, what is going on? And that's when he fades out of it before, like, he wishes he could talk to her in that moment, but he fades
Mm-hmm.
out of it and um, he's at camp. Demigods use cell phones as signals agitate every monster within 100 miles. It's like sending up a flare. Here I am. Please rearrange my face. Even within the safe borders of camp, that's not the kind of advertising we wanted to do. And he also says, because of this, like, not a lot of people have cell phones, but Annabeth is one of the people who does. Um, then he ends up going and doing chores with Annabeth. They're not meant to be partner chores, but they both didn't want to do them alone.
Mm-hmm.
And so he's going with her to inspect cabins, and he's meanwhile doing like he's going through Chiron's mail. It seems like he has
Mm-hmm.
it with him, at least the way I'm reading it.
Mm-hmm.
First thing that kind of caught my eye in this part was so Percy's looking through Chiron's stack of reports, and he's basically getting or seeing all of these different messages. It says from demigods, nature spirits, and satyrs around the country. Little battles were raging everywhere. Camp recruitment was down to zero. Satyrs were having trouble finding new demigods and bringing them to Half Blood Hill because so many monsters were roaming the country. Our friend Talia, who led the Hunters of Artemis, hadn't been heard from in months, and if Artemis knew what had happened to them, she wasn't sharing information. So he reads that while they're inspecting cabins.
Mm-hmm.
Right after that is when they run into Selena, um, who was sitting there eating chocolates. Then they go to, it says, the common area. They saw a fight break out between Ares and Apollo cabins. Apollo campers were armed with fire bombs, and they flew over the Ares cabin in a chariot pulled by two Pegasi. And he also says the chariot is one he had never seen before, but it looked like a sweet ride. We find out from Annabeth this chariot is the reason why Clarice has pulled the Ares cabin from battle.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Now, it's hard for me. This is one thing. Part of me was tempted to ask Becky, and I don't know if I still will, of how Rick must feel about the Bryceus thing because, like, he wrote this situation where it is a little bit more clearly, like, what to do here. You know what I mean? Like,
Mm-hmm.
whose actual loot the chariot is. But, with the whole thing that happens with Bryceus, well, first of all, the way Apollo's involved is just that, not Bryceus, but Chryseus, which I know is very confusing that their names are so similar,
Mm-hmm.
is the war bride that Agamemnon originally had that has to go back to her dad, who's a priest of Apollo, because they were under a plague. Basically, when he couldn't ransom his daughter back, he was like, "Apollo, help me out, dude," and
Yeah,
Apollo sent
I
a
remember
plague
that
on the
part.
Greeks. Yes, so that's how Apollo's involved in the Iliad. But to have it be Apollo cabin versus Ares cabin is interesting. You had asked me when we were reading these chapters ourselves, is there any like beef between Ares and Apollo in mythology? And no, and when it comes to the Trojan War stuff, they're even on the same side, which is usually where you see the beefs like in action.
Mm-hmm.
So it's interesting that it's written this way, where we have a situation, the situation being that they attacked people that were on Luke's side that were in this chariot, and it was the Apollo people that overtook the chariot, but the Ares cabin was leading this raid, this particular raid.
Mm-hmm.
And so Clarice feels she has that claim on it because it was her raid, and the Apollo cabin feels like, okay, but we're the ones that got the chariot, so
Mm-hmm.
like it's our chariot. And Chiron has even said himself at this point, the Apollo cabin has more like like actual claim to it in a non-partial way.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm really curious now of like, wait, how do we feel about Bryceus now, Rick? I need to know.
You should ask her
Yeah,
because she has opinions too, but beyond like what he would think. But there might be some writing that he's done somewhere that she could
yeah.
tell you about.
I mean, the
Um,
situation has changed enough that it's like, okay, this isn't a one for one, so maybe this isn't his commentary on how he feels about Achilles' protest, but I'm kind of curious now.
this whole book is what he feels about Achilles, and he makes it very clear.
Yeah.
Um, because I will say that I did a video the other day that people seem to like, where it was like a thought that just kept having over the last couple of weeks that was bothering me, so I finally just said it, which was a lot of the people who like Clarice and Selena, their default usually is like, oh well, it's Achilles and Patroclus, and so it has to be like there has to be some like romance there because it's about those two characters, and they're known as something romantic, obviously. And the thing I said was like you can't know if that's supposed to be romantic unless you actually analyze what Rick thinks about it first.
Mhm.
And people generally seem to like that, which I was glad about because like yeah, what does Rick think about that dynamic? Because I know that when we read Song of Achilles, and when I just think about the myth, even outside of Madeline Miller's adaptation of it, I don't like that relationship. I don't like that he sacrifices himself for Achilles, who doesn't really seem to treat him with respect after he dies, and also doesn't seem to even like acknowledge like how big something like that is, that he did that or that he felt like he had to do that. And so I'm not really, I remember when we read Song of Achilles, I was like, I have a hard time believing that Rick Riordan would be okay with this sort of thing too. And I said that because of what I remembered about The Last Olympian at the time. And so now that we're actually reading it, I'm like, yeah, it's hard for me to believe that he would be okay with the way that they talk about the other like women, like Bryceus and stuff in those stories, and just how they're just like thrown around like pieces of money almost. And just overall that whole situation, because it is, this is like so stupid that these two cabins are fighting over who gets to use this chariot. And I was like, you guys are arguing over who gets to use a chariot in the middle of like a fight for your quite literal life.
They're like throwing curses at each other, one of which makes the Ares cabiners like start rhyming in couplets because of Apollo being a god of poetry. Um, and of course, Percy's like, this is stupid. We're all fighting for our lives. Why does everybody care about this chariot? I feel like
Mm-hmm.
the people are ignoring like the why not both answer of it all, because
Yeah.
you have an Ares driver with an Apollo person, shooting off their arrows from the side. That's how you do it, okay?
Mm-hmm. And
Um,
I did
yeah.
want to, I forgot to make this point last time, but it is also the point to make is that like in the original, myth with Achilles not fighting because of his own ego, like he's keeping himself out, but he's the only one who's not fighting. In this
Yeah.
situation, Clarice is saying my entire cabin will not fight, and I'm sure that her entire cabin wants to fight, but if they go against her, then that's a whole like crazy like power dynamic sort of thing going on. And so it puts it in an even worse position to make it just more obvious of what's going on here, that like
Yeah.
all those other kids would feel like as the book goes on of not being involved in all these things when they likely want to, but she is just refusing to let them. Like at least when it comes to Achilles, he was just doing it to himself.
He reads a note that says, "Dear Grover, woods outside Toronto attacked by giant evil badger. Tried to do as you suggested and summon the power of Pan. No effect. Many naiad trees destroyed. Retreating to Otwata. Please advise, where are you, Gleason Hedge Protector?" And so we find out he hasn't heard anything from Grover, hasn't gotten anything from the empathy link. Like he knows that if something bad happened to Grover, potentially he would have died too. So like
Mm-hmm.
Grover's probably still out there, but nobody knows what's happening with him either.
In like
And
2 months, right? I think
yeah,
it's 2 months. That's a long time.
yeah. So because he had been stopping by to visit Juniper, Juniper can't leave her tree. So yeah, it feels like because we found out Thalia was missing and now we know Grover's missing, in succession, it's like thing after thing after thing, and it's like, oh
Yeah.
my gosh, it's just hitting.
Yeah.
Percy realizes, I don't know who else to tell about this dream I just had about Rachel.
Mm-hmm.
And he knows that Rachel is a very sore subject with Annabeth, but he decides to try it anyway. And he says, um, he stops her. He says, I had this dream about Rachel. And then he tells her about it. And all she says after that, this got me kind of mad at her for a second, was, I'm not sure, like, I don't get why you're telling me this. What do you want me to say? And, like, yeah. And he's like, I don't know, you're the strategist.
Hello,
Just
you're
tell me.
Annabeth. You're my friend,
Yeah.
right?
But yeah, he asks her, if you were Kronos planning this war, what would you do next? I'd use Typhon as a distraction, then I'd hit Olympus discreetly while the gods were in the west. Just like Rachel's picture. And so he's trying to make the argument to her of like, okay, but what if her dreams that she's drawing these pictures of actually mean something?
Mm-hmm.
Like, and Annabeth's like, she's just a stupid mortal girl. Like, why are we even talking about her right now? Like, not dropping her feelings of jealousy here. I knew we shouldn't have shown you the prophecy. All it did was scare you. You run away from things when you're scared. And Percy, of course, is like, me?
He's like, do
Yeah.
I?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I need to talk about. One thing I wanted to say was before she says this whole thing,
Hmm.
he's saying like he's just scared. And it's just like trying to talk to somebody that he feels like he can be like honest about that with.
Hmm.
Like he's just telling her, everyone at camp is fighting over stupid things. Typhon is going to show up. The rest of like Olympus is just like open for anyone to hurt it. Like he doesn't mention his dad, but still his dad is fighting. Grover's missing. Everybody's missing. Thalia's missing. Everything is like falling apart. And he's like, and my soul is supposed to be reaped. And that's like him just trying to make a joke out of something really serious. But she says, like, oh, we shouldn't have told you because you run away from things when you're scared. No. No. Annabeth runs away from things when she's scared.
Yeah, projection.
He does not. Like I could like literally list off something that happens in every single book. I did it in my head before we like went live, but let me try to remember all the things that I thought of. But at the end of Battle of the Labyrinth, she literally like runs away from him to go to California for the next year because she realizes how stupid she feels stupid, that she believed that Luke would like come back or something when he just tried to wipe everybody out. In the beginning of the book, she quite literally walks away from him when he's trying to talk to her about what's going on at camp and says she wants to go talk to Clarice instead, leaving him sitting there being like, what's going on? And in season 3, the whole part of why her and Percy are in this weird place where he feels so weird around Thalia to start, where he's like walking on eggshells around them, is because she's been at school with Thalia and hasn't heard from her in like 3 or 4 months. And so she's the one not talking to him while all that stuff is going on. It's literally every single book, once they become friends, there's something that happens and she just doesn't know how to deal with it, and so she just doesn't. Like, out of both of them, she is the one that runs away from things when she's scared.
Yeah.
Percy doesn't. He has the opposite effect. He runs towards things that scare him in a very self-destructive way of just like, I'm just going to rip the Band-Aid off.
Hmm.
He was scared of fighting Luke/Kronos on the Andromeda and just like immediately tried to run up to him and stab him. Like,
Yeah.
that is, I do that. I'm just laughing because I do that. People like us do that sort of thing. Like the post I remember on Tumblr that I always remember about him is you're like a Percy person. If when people start insulting you or when you're in a scary situation, you start insulting them to make it worse. And that's literally what he does. And that's what people like us do. It's like, oh, I'm scared of you. You're saying things that upset me or trigger me. I'm going to call you stupid now, just to make this even scarier for myself because that's apparently what I do. But that is what we do. And so this is one of those scenes that like the fandom talks about a lot. And I will say that I think that the fandom can be kind of misogynistic about this scene because I understand why Annabeth is saying the things that she is, even if it's like you are upset about how she's saying this kind of stuff to Percy right now.
Yeah.
You can understand why because, she's known for all this time that Percy is going to die. She at this point realizes that she wasted a lot of time with the whole stuff with Luke when she shouldn't have. And so when you realize that, you want things to happen with that person once you realize how silly you were being. And she doesn't want to have to like wait for him to figure it out. But that's part of the whole thing with people is just because you realize it doesn't mean the other person is ready at the same time as you, just because you are kind of thing. But it's also the theme of Achilles in this book. Like, guys, hello. Like, you all talk about how these heroes are the heroes of the book. What do you think that means? She wants Percy to like go out there and like fight and be strong and tough and stuff. And he is the leader. And so when he's sitting there feeling like sad and defeated and like how could we ever possibly win this situation when nobody's getting along and everyone's missing and everything is terrible, she gets upset with him because it's like, well, when you're the leader, if you're the one that starts questioning stuff and feeling like you can't do it, then everyone else is going to start like being scared and thinking that they can't do it either. Like that's why when I was talking about my childhood shit, that I could never show like when I was actually scared, because if I showed that I was scared, then everyone else was gonna panic even more, because I'm the one that stays calm all the time. And so if I'm upset, then everyone is like, "Whoa, like what's going on if she's upset and showing that she's upset?" Because that didn't happen very often. And it's the same thing with Percy, like he's the leader. And so he's sitting there trying to tell her like it's hard for me to believe that we're going to be successful. And she doesn't want to hear that, because then that makes her think like maybe he will die, or maybe all these other people will die. And so she gets upset at him for bringing it up when he's just like scared, and he's trying to talk to somebody that he feels like he can trust. But he can't do that because he's the leader of everybody. And that's like the hard thing about him in this book, is that he is absolutely terrified all the time, but he can't really show it too much to anybody, because then if he does, it might affect how everybody else fights, because he's supposed to be the prophecy kid that like brings them all to success. And so there's that, and she is the whole reason why she thinks that Luke is this still has something good in him. For a lot of that is because she interpreted him fighting everything when she was 7 years old as him being like her protector, and him being like this amazing person that always protected her from everything. When she was around somebody like her dad growing up, she would see somebody like Luke doing that kind of violent stuff as like, oh, he actually does care about me, because he's going out and fighting all these things in my name to protect me from harm. But she doesn't realize still fully yet that somebody doing that kind of thing isn't necessarily a good thing, or they're not necessarily doing it because they're a good person to protect you. They're doing it for like a lot more toxic reasons a lot of the time. She wants Percy to do that. She
Hmm.
wants Percy to like pick up his sword and just go running off into battle and make some quip and say that he's ready for everything and there's no way that we're going to lose and all of that stuff. But that's not Percy. He's fucking terrified. And so she doesn't want to hear that right now. And so she says that. But when you look at what's going on in this story, it's very logical about why she feels like this and why she would feel like he's being a coward, or why won't you do anything? Because I honestly think this part of her trying to like have this like romantic moment with Percy is her just in denial about what is actually going on around them, because most of the time I think that Annabeth especially would never be the kind of person that would be like doing this kind of thing right now, right before the biggest battle of like the history of demigods is about to happen. But I think that that's her reaction to that, is like, I want to act like everything's normal, or I want to just pretend like everything could be fine. And she's more upset at him that he's making her think about how it's not fine
Yeah.
and it's not okay. And her what she says goes directly into like what happens next, but I just people take that scene out of context, and this is like me talking. Like, I when I read this book for the first time, I thought that Annabeth was the spy. I thought that Annabeth was the spy when I read this scene, and I was glad that she got mad at him, because I thought that that meant that she wouldn't like hurt him later on when he found out that she was the spy. Like, I at this point when I was reading this for the first time, I was still convinced that she was the one telling Luke everything, and I didn't want Percy to be around her. Like when she wanted to kiss him, I was like, get away from her. Like in my head. And so if I can read this part and recognize what's going on with Annabeth, I think everybody else can too.
Stop it, guys.
Mhm.
Um, let's see. So, um, after that, they go to Demeter's cabin, Hephaestus's cabin, where they give them a higher score just because they're sad about Beckendorf.
Mhm.
Um, they make their way finally to Athena's cabin, where everything looks great except for Annabeth's stuff, surprisingly. Um, let's see. So this, of course, is where we introduce another piece of lore, because, of course, Rick had to give us the slowest burn of friends, or I don't know, can we call Annabeth and Percy enemies to lovers because of the first book? But like,
Not really.
yeah, the slowest friends to lovers burn. We don't find out until now of why it's okay that demigods are dating, which is, um, it also breaks fourth wall the way it's written. And I know some of you might be thinking, aren't all demigods related on the godly side, and doesn't that make dating gross? But the thing is, the godly side of your family doesn't count. Genetically speaking, since gods don't have DNA, a demigod would never think about dating someone who had the same godly parent, like two kids from the Athena cabin. No way. But a daughter of Aphrodite and a son of Hephaestus, they're not related, so it's no problem. But
Mm-hmm.
yeah, and he starts talking about this because he notices he's thinking about Annabeth and like noticing that she's gotten more mature and pretty over the summer. And like we're getting a little bit of flirting here in their little exchanges. Um,
Is that what this scene is supposed to be?
a little bit, yes. So, it's particularly from Annabeth's side at one point though.
Mm-hmm.
So is that the part, she brushed her hair behind her ear like she does when she's nervous. The whole thing with Beckendorf and Selena, it kind of makes you think about what's important, about losing people who are important. And of course, you're just like screaming at Percy a little bit of like, bro,
I'm
she's
not.
telling you, I was like, she's telling you something, bro. Like,
I know that she is, but I'm also like, what are you doing? His birthday is
yeah,
in 3 days.
yeah,
Like, and he's going to die then? He thinks he's going to die then. And you know that. You've known since like, you met him
since before you met
that
him.
he's going to die. And so, out of all the times in the world to be doing this with Percy, why are you doing this with him right now? Like,
Yeah,
he's, Charlie just died. He has no idea what he's doing. He's freaked out by everything. And also, Luke,
yeah.
hello? Like, why bring that up now? You're still like asking if what's going on with Luke. That whole situation has not fully ended or
Yeah.
anything like that yet. She's still like is it's still very much up in the air. Like, he says that himself in one of the earlier chapters, that he has the whole reason why he thinks everything is easy with Rachel is
Hmm.
because everything is so confusing with her with Luke that he has no idea what she thinks about anything and how she feels
Yeah.
about anything. And so I don't think that it's fair for her to show up and just be like, "Oh, well, I'm ready." And even though
Yeah.
I understand why she would feel like this, like, when I think about Annabeth's perspective, I imagine that like around this time is when she's been realizing that Percy was right about a lot of things, and she didn't want to believe that he was, and so she's realizing, like, I wasted all this time with this person, and now they might die, and so she's just like, oh, what the hell. But it also is like a thing of this is like quite literally the worst timing in the history of the planet to try to have this sort of discussion with Percy right now. Like, Percy's barely like figuring out what he's doing on a day-to-day basis right now, much less like thinking about trying to figure out how to become romantically involved with one of the closest people in his life that has last summer told him verbatim that she had romantic feelings for the guy that's tried to kill him for 5 years. And so it's like, I'm not really sure how anybody would respond to that sort of situation, much less somebody like Percy who doesn't feel like he's that important, exactly, especially like right now after Charlie just died.
Hmm.
And I'm just like, this is like the worst timing in the entire world. But I understood that that's what she was trying to get at, but it's also like a thing of, why would you what? Like, I
Yeah.
understand like why, but I'm also like, I don't think it's fair to like be like, oh, he's just being a stupid boy. No, he's just completely overwhelmed. What are you supposed to do in that time of your life? um
Yeah.
what?
But yeah, his ADHD brain gets the best of him here because then he notices her owl earrings. Then he's like, "Oh, like your family," and she's like, "Yeah, like my family," like
Mm-hmm.
because he bursted her
he just
bubble.
he can't do that. And
Yeah.
then especially like when he is just trying to say nice things, like he's trying to say like, oh, maybe,
Hmm.
maybe like next summer we can do this and that, and he's like, oh wait, I'm probably going to be dead in like 3 days. But like, that's what I mean by like, how you what is he doing? Like,
Yeah.
what is he supposed to be doing right now? He knows that his birthday at this point in the book is in like 4 days, I think, 3 or 4 or 5 days.
I think it's 5 at this point.
And it's like, what? what? Like, how is he supposed to think about anything? And especially like knowing that if he doesn't beat whatever is going to happen, then the entire world as they know it will just end, and it will be something completely different and horrible. And so it's like, he's just trying to be nice, but it's like everything he says, he's like, but I don't know what's going to happen in 3 days.
Hmm.
And so nothing that I say right now is working because we don't even know. I'm probably going to be dead. We don't know who's even going to be alive anymore, what our world is even going to look like. And it's just like, can I just like get out of this room and stop talking because I don't know. I don't know what to do. And it's like, yeah,
Yeah.
that is like an impossible thing of to try to talk to somebody about anything right now. Because it's like everything is based on he just has to know if he's going to live past his birthday.
Yeah, and they're 15 and relationships feel so big and so like crazy when you're
Mm-hmm.
15. So yeah, after this, it, as you said, it leads into the next event because Percy runs into Nico, Juniper, and it was Linnaeus, right?
I hate that guy.
Yeah. Um, oh wait, no. Hold on, sorry. Beckendorf's funeral first.
Yeah.
Um, so they burn his funeral shroud, which is made of metal links. Um, I didn't see how it would burn, but the fates must have been helping out. The metal melted in the fire and turned to golden smoke, which rose into the sky. The campfire flames always reflected the campers' moods, and today they burned black. So everybody's super affected by this. Once again, have to remind everybody, as you said, doesn't matter how little Charlie is going to be in the actual TV series, he's going to make an impact because he's literally been in every chapter so far, even
Mm-hmm.
if he died in the first chapter.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, like his whole funeral is basically a black cloud over everybody here. Percy says, I hope Beckendorf's spirit would end up in Elysium. Ely- I always want to say it.
Elysium.
Elysium. Elysium. Yeah. Anyways, that he choose to try to be reborn because you can go back 3 different times, and if you make it 3 different times, the third time you get to the Isle of the Blessed. Um, let's see. As this funeral is going on, Clarice and Chris are sitting kind of close to Selena. um, Percy decides to check in with her. He says, I'm really sorry. Beckendorf carried your picture. He looked at it right before we went into battle. You meant a lot to him. You made the last year the best year of his life. And then she starts sobbing. And of course, when you know the reason she's sobbing, it's a lot more sad. But
Mm-hmm.
here you're just, because Clarice kind of doesn't know what's going on, and she's like, well, Percy made her sad by bringing up her boyfriend at his funeral. What the fuck? Like, gets mad at him. Is like, why the hell would you do that?
That's what you should do.
Yeah. And so Selena says, no, it's all right. Thank you, Percy. And then she leaves. Clarice asks if she wants company. So Clarice is at least being a good friend here of like, okay, are you going off by yourself or do you need me? Um, and she says she wants to be by herself. So Clarice and Chris stay. Um, Clarice mentions she's stronger than she seems. And then Percy starts kind of like getting into a fight with her about like, why doesn't your cabin fight then? Why don't
Mm-hmm.
you, like, you want to do something to help her, you want to do something to honor Charlie, like, hello.
Yeah. One
Yeah.
thing with Charlie and Selena that I wanted to bring up now, that actually our friend Sophia brought up to me like probably like a year ago, and I just like kept it in my head all the time because I was like, oh right, this is 100% part of what Rick is doing is that Charlie is an Hephaestus kid or was an Hephaestus kid. Selena's an Aphrodite kid, so that's just like them being like the like not curse, but like kind of like the bad stuff that happens between their parents, them like doing it the right way
Yeah.
this time. And so that's clearly what that relationship is supposed to be. Um this part is just God. Like I'm glad they have like Chris Rodriguez there as like somebody to get Clarice to stop talking sometimes, but
Yeah.
this part is just, it is like a very extremely valid point, which is kind of like, this is why I don't think that Rick likes the fact that Patroclus, kills himself for Achilles. I don't think he likes that. I don't think he likes kind of the dynamic of that relationship, because of how he's showing like Clarice in this book, that she's sitting there being like, oh, I wish I could help her. And it's like, it doesn't matter if you'll go and like console her emotionally right now when you're also refusing to get involved with the actual most important thing that's ever happened to any of them in their entire lives and multiple generations going back. Of she's refusing to get involved in a battle because of a chariot, not even anything that actually matters, just thinking that because they were the ones in charge of a battle that they deserve to get like all of the rewards from it, instead of the other kids that also were putting their life on the line getting something for all of the, like, that's like a bad sort of, in my mind, that's like a bad kind of like, I can't think of the right word, but just the idea that like her cabin is supposed to get everything just because they were leading it. But like, what about all
Yeah.
the normal people, or not
I mean,
normal, but
that's
like, what
almost
about all
more.
the other kids that are out there risking their lives too? If they got that thing, they deserve to have it, because they did a lot of dangerous stuff. They deserve to get rewards just like you do.
Yeah, she's almost more of a stand-in for Agamemnon when I think about it now, with like,
Hmm.
because that feels more like what Agamemnon was doing there, of like, well, I'm the leader of the Greek army, what I say goes.
Yeah, I feel like she's kind of a mix of both, because
Yeah.
Achilles, at least in Song of Achilles, I'll say, he is very much like, well, I was prophesized to win this war, and so you can't do anything to me. Um,
Hmm.
and
Yeah.
is just throwing his weight around, kind of knowing that he can do that to get what he wants, and doesn't think about how other people might like respond to him doing that kind of stuff, and not thinking that, oh, they'll just give in because they have to, because
Hmm.
I'm so important that they have to give in. And that's what it feels like she's kind of doing, is thinking like, oh, well, we're the ones that are always in charge of all the battle plans, and so they have to give in to us at some point. So I'm just gonna like keep doing this. Um, and especially this part when Percy even brings, he's like, I hate to bring this up, but I saved your life in Sea of Monsters.
Yes.
So, and she says like, bring up anything else but that. And it's like, this is why I don't think that he likes that dynamic at all, because it's like, Percy is, this is Percy. He is not somebody to bring something like this up, or to bring up things that he's done for other people to try to get them to do things for him. That's like so far away from his normal personality to do that kind of stuff. And but he's sitting there, he's like trying
Yeah.
anything because he knows how important it is for her cabin to be involved in this stuff. And so he even brings that up, and she even says no to that.
Yeah.
And it's like, he saved your life. He saved your life. And you are saying like, no, I, even though you saved my life,
Hmm.
I still won't get involved because I want a chariot?
Yeah, it's
And
a
so
little
it's just like, she's
ridiculous.
completely like I still say that like, you can think that Clarice is doing this stuff in the way that everyone else is doing all this stuff, that they're under too much stress and they don't know what to do, and she's just trying to come up with anything, honestly, I think at this point, of not having to be involved in more battles or something. But it's still like, what are you doing? Like, you're talking to Percy, the
Hmm.
person that you know is supposed to be stabbed to death on his birthday.
Yeah.
And knowing that he knows that, like, and you're still like, just the idea of saying to Percy's face after he knows about that and is about to happen, to be like, no, I won't help you for any reason at all. It's like, what do you mean? He's gonna die. And he's basically begging you for help.
Chapter 5 is I drive my dog into a tree, and opens with Miss O'Leary coming towards him. Well, we already knew this, but like, it's something we got reminded here. Eckendorf was the one who took care of Miss O'Leary, like when he was not at camp.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, luckily, we don't get one of those like super sad dog doesn't see their master scenes, but like, just hearing the personal touches of he had smelted Miss O'Leary's favorite bronze chewing bone. He'd forged her collar with a little smiley face and crossbone name tag. Next to me, Beckendorf had been her best friend.
Yeah, Beckendorf's great.
Yeah.
And it's just also just like sweet that Percy is like, I need to go take care of his pet now that he is not around anymore to make sure that she's okay.
Well,
It's just,
I mean, it was technically Percy's, but yeah,
yeah,
it was like their
but
shared
still.
pet. Yeah. So this is where the Grover, Juniper, and Linnaeus, or sorry, not Grover, Nico, Juniper, and Linnaeus thing happens. Juniper and Linnaeus had been arguing because Juniper wants Linnaeus to help find Grover.
Hmm.
And he's like, no, that dude's a liar. He said Pan was dead. What the hell? None of us like him anymore. And Nico happened to have stumbled upon this scene, so he's just kind of there. And of
Hmm.
course, Juniper's just being her worried, like anxious girlfriend self.
And she's right, like the
Hmm.
part that we kind of skipped over before where Percy was saying, like, that letter that he was reading that
Yeah.
somebody sent Chiron, or the message, I guess. Because I think they're basically like iris messages almost that their people are sending him. But it is true that, like, he would never leave. Like, I love the idea of Grover going around the world and, like, telling nature spirits that you don't need to sit and wait for Pan, you can do this yourself.
Yeah.
Um, but he would never leave those people, like, scared like that. And when they're trying to fight back for the first time and they're not sure what to do or if they're almost like doing it right. He would never like leave people like that. He's Grover. He would he would find some way to contact those people to like make them feel like they can do it.
Yeah.
And so there is something definitely wrong with the fact that he hasn't been seen in like 2 months and the people that he's been helping haven't heard anything from. He would never do that. I wanted to kill this guy. This satyr. I
Yeah.
wanted to kill him in Battle of the Labyrinth too, but I especially wanted to kill him during this part because it's just another person that is just being really selfish when all
Yeah.
these things are going on. Like all of these kids are like begging him for help, and he's like, "No, my ego is too big."
Exactly. He's still mad over the whole thing that happened at the end of Battle of the Labyrinth with the Cloven Elders. The fact that it was like, okay, I guess Grover's Pan now. Like, he was
Hmm.
not okay with any of that. Thinks the
My
whole thing
favorite
was a
part of
lie.
of this whole like argument part
Yeah.
is when he's like that wasn't like a real vote. Dionysus and whatever don't count, and Percy, I'm gonna tell Dionysus you said that.
Yeah. And it's so funny too because Percy hates Dionysus, but he's like,
Mm-hmm.
I know the moment that I tell Dionysus this, he's on my side. So like, yeah.
100%.
Yeah. So he Percy eventually gets like so like pissed at this part. First of all, Linnaeus doesn't want to talk in front of Miss O'Leary. He starts throwing a fit that she's even there, doesn't want to do anything until Miss O'Leary's gone. So Nico's like, okay, I'll go walk the dog. Like,
Mm-hmm.
and Percy ends up grabbing him by the shirt and he says, listen, Linnaeus, when Kronos attacks, he's going to have packs of hellhounds. He's going to destroy everything in his path, mortals, gods, demigods. Do you think he'll let satyrs go free? You're supposed to be a leader, so lead. Get out there and see what's happening. Find Grover and bring Juniper some news. Now go. And sends him off. Yeah, like basically, and it's funny too. He like lets him go, and he's like, I mean, I didn't mean to push him, but he's top heavy, so he did fall.
That's fine. He can fall.
Yeah.
It's fine. He can fall over. He deserves it because
Yes.
he's horrible.
Yeah,
He
and
needed to be yelled at during this time with all the bad things he was saying about Grover.
yeah, and he just gets mad at Percy. Percy's like, fine, whatever, fuck you, go fight
Yeah,
Grover.
I
Like,
don't care. Just go do something.
I love Nico's like, good job, Percy. Judging from the trail of goat pellets, I'd say you shook him up pretty well. We find out Juniper had asked Nico if she knew anything about Grover, and he says, like, my powers are kind of limited there because Grover's a satyr, not a mortal, and I wouldn't
Hmm.
know. And she says, okay, but like if you hear anything, you'll tell me, right? And Nico's like, yeah, I'll tell you.
Mm-hmm.
Which is just really cute to think of like sweet little Juniper having this interaction with him.
Mm-hmm.
And then she ends up leaving because Miss O'Leary gets a little too interested in her and she's like, wait a second, I know about dogs and trees. I'm out of here.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. We find out then from Nico, he just like automatically is like, oh yeah, and I'm sorry to hear about Beckendorf. I talked to him. Like, and Percy's just like, okay.
Yeah.
Did he say anything? He doesn't blame you. He figured you'd be beating yourself up, and he said you shouldn't. Which, like, I'm glad once again another spirit's like, hey Percy, not your fault.
Mm-hmm. And he's like, what if it is my fault?
Yeah. So he decided he's gonna stay in Elysium, and then he said he's waiting for someone. Of course, we all know he means Selena, which is very sweet. It's
Mm-hmm.
sweet and sad. But yeah. And then Percy asks Nico about his dream from the beginning of the book, where they were looking at Mount Orthus, and Nico was like, hey, so this is why we gotta do our plan now. And Nico's like, yeah, by the way, that was real. I didn't mean to be spying on the Titans. I was in the neighborhood. He's talking to him about his plan again. He says, that it's going to come down to him and Luke. There's only one way he can beat Luke. He needs to be equally as strong as him. And Percy starts thinking back to that fight that they had, like, on our last episode, we talked about
Mm-hmm.
it, where it's like a very small cut to his arm basically took him out for the rest of the fight. And he's like,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, maybe he's right. And because Annabeth had this fight with Percy where she's like, you run away from scary things, and because this plan that Nico has been telling him about is supposedly scary and very risky, Percy's like, well, I'm not gonna run away, I guess. And
Yeah.
yeah, so like I don't know. Of course you're frustrated at Annabeth for saying it in the first place, but like I don't know because I mean, I know what his plan is. Like, we've talked about this. We've talked about his plan being the thing with the river Styx and stuff, but, like, because it's not so explicit just yet, I'm, like, not... I don't know. I'm annoyed at Annabeth, but not as mad as I could be yet.
I wasn't really annoyed at Annabeth. During this part, I was, like, surprised with Nico and more not happy with him. During, like, this chapter and the next chapter, I was remembering how I remember that when I read these books for the first time, I didn't really like Nico that much in the way that he's one of most people's favorite characters. He wasn't one of my favorite characters. I honestly wasn't sure about him until like really late into Heroes of Olympus. I knew that he
Yeah.
was like a good kid and wasn't going to like turn against Percy or anything, but I just wasn't sure about him, and I didn't remember why I felt like that. But reading these like couple chapters made me remember like why I felt like that, because he's just pressuring Percy to do this plan until he gives in. Like Percy keeps telling him no, and he's like, do it anyway. And like this is why I said I felt like a genius talking about how Percy hates fighting. Think of one other person in this book series where somebody would come up to you and be like, if you jump into this river, it will make you like immortal and really hard to be killed. And they would be like, no, I don't want to do that.
Yeah.
For the last year, he's been telling Nico no. And like Nico's telling him during this part that he's basically saying to Percy, and Percy saying it to us, that every time Nico has seen him for the last year, he's mentioned it to try to get him to change his mind. And he keeps saying no. Like, I don't want to do this. I don't want to, like, the way that this book series describes it is they call it the Achilles curse. Like, Rick is very, like, definitive with this. He doesn't want to do it. He doesn't want to do this. He doesn't want to be like Achilles. He doesn't want to be like this big, strong fighter that just goes, like, marching into battle and kills bitches and takes people's names. He doesn't want to do that. He's been telling Nico no for over a year, and even at this point, he still wants to tell him no. Nico has to basically, like, emotionally manipulate him to get him to say yes. And, like, the memory of Annabeth saying like, "Oh, you're being a coward." This is like literally seeing Percy going against his like natural way of being. He doesn't want to do this kind of shit. He doesn't want to go out there and be like this invincible fighter that does these amazing things and all this kind of stuff. He doesn't want to do that. Every other person in this book would be like salivating by the idea of being able to have that much power, and he's like, get it away from me. I don't want anything to do with that. Having that sort of power would be scary. I don't want to be like that. Percy is like the last person that would ever want to make something change himself in some way that makes him more different from everybody else already, because he already feels very different from everybody else. He's already a Poseidon kid that sets himself apart immediately in a way that nobody else besides like other big three kids really deal with. But like, he doesn't want to do it. He doesn't want to do the Achilles curse. He does it because everybody is telling him that he should. Yeah. Like, Annabeth is telling him, Nico's telling him, even like the satyr thing is telling him, like Clarice is telling him, everyone around him is telling him that this is what he's supposed to do. But like, that's not Percy. And so he's like, I don't want to do this. But like, everyone keeps telling me that this is the only way that we're gonna win, and I want to live. I don't want everybody to die. Yeah. So I guess I'm just gonna go do it. But it's not because he actually wants to. It's because he feels everyone is telling him that this is the only way that they're gonna make it, which is the polar opposite of how they actually win. Yeah. But this is like what he's being told by everybody at this point. It's like, yeah, this is how heroes win battles, right? Is by coming like super invincible and like superhuman and not even have any ounce of humanity in themselves really anymore, because nothing can hurt them anymore. That's how you win these battles, and so you need to become like that so you can win. Even though like Nico during this part says, you know, I just like want you to do this because I don't want you to die. Essentially, it still is like a thing of, you're trying to get him to do something that he's told you over and over again that he doesn't want to do.
Yeah.
And it does.
Oh,
and
he doesn't just say, because I don't want you to die. This is the emotional manipulation of it.
Yeah.
I don't want my sister's sacrifice to be in vain. Like, yeah.
Honestly, like, we haven't gotten to this kind of stuff. I'm sure it's very soon. I think it's in the next chapters, honestly. But I do think that part of why Nico is so, like, about this is partly, I think he probably feels guilty about what a hard time he gave Percy in Battle of the Labyrinth and wants to like find some way to like make it up to him. But I also think that he wants Percy to do it because Hades is like trying to do things in this book at first to try to get Nico to be the prophecy kid. And so right now he's probably like super about it because he's probably trying to get Percy to do it so that he doesn't end up having to do it. Yeah. And I'm sure it's like a mix of all of those things. 'Cause yeah, he's 12 during this part.
The other thing too, and this is just like my own headcanon, is what we know of Nico at this point. He seems like he'd be a little gamer kid, right? Mm-hmm. And I know, at least the way that I play Zelda is I have to have every armor set and then I level them up and then I actually do stuff with them. Mm-hmm. Like, I needed to have full stealth armor before I did anything having to do with the Yiga kind of thing. So I feel like this is him with Percy being his little like video game avatar of like, let me get you all of the upgrades first before we send you into battle. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, we find out Nico has been trying to find out more about his own past, his mortal past, and then also he says, I did find some stuff out about Luke's past, and that's where we have to start. And so he tells him, we're going to Connecticut, we're going to go visit May Castellan, and he tells Percy about this mode of travel that apparently anything underworldly can like do, which mm-hmm. is just using shadows. Essentially, it drains them. It's hard to do, but it's something that they all can do because all darkness, all shadows are the same thing. So Nico's like, I'm going to go separately, but you ride on Miss O'Leary, whisper in her ear, we're going to this place to see May Castellan, and they take off. Mm-hmm.
I will say this one part. That's part of why I didn't like this at all with Nico is that just the idea that he was sure that he was going to convince Percy to do this plan to the point that he looked up where Luke's mom is. I'm like, what are you doing? Like, looking up where Luke's mom is. This is Luke's mother. Like, would you want people looking up your family and knowing where they are and showing up at their house unannounced, even if they are okay? Even if it's just, like, fear for the person's life who shows up at Sally's apartment without Percy knowing. Like, that sort of thing would not be okay at all. Even if you were a nice person and you weren't wanting to hurt them, just that general idea that he's so sure that Percy will do this and going so far to just, like, look up where Luke's mom is and isn't thinking about the idea of, like, we're showing up at Luke's mom's house. If she's alive, what could she possibly be thinking about what he's been doing? No one's ever met her before. Percy didn't even know that she was alive until this moment when Nico says he says he assumed that his mom was dead because of him running away. He just figured his mom would have to be dead if he ran away from home when he was 9. And to find out that she's alive, like, nobody knows anything about his mom except for Annabeth and Thalia, who don't like talking about it with anybody. And so it's just the idea of that, like, you're a child, I get it, but also, like, you're, like, going through all these things and, like, not really thinking about what you're really doing. Like, you're showing up at Luke's mom's house. Like, there are two reactions during this part with May is, like, it shows just, like, the polar opposite way that they're kind of reacting to everything. And it's just interesting to see it happen, but it's like I was upset when I read this part, realizing that the entire reason why Percy has to go through this scene with May and Luke's mom is because of Nico basically making him. And I was just like, this is horrible for him to experience. And it's like, was this necessary for him to experience, like, May Castellan like this? And especially going in having no idea. Like, why didn't you do more to look up things about her besides just where she lived? Like, if you would have known what was going on, they at least wouldn't have gone in unaware, and it wouldn't have been as horrendous as it actually is. But I just realized, like, wow, this is why I never was sure about Nico before, because the whole reason why any of this stuff happens, and because, especially, like, having to see Luke's mom like this, like, it's because of Nico just, like, bursting in without thinking about it. Mm-hmm. And it's like, God.
Yeah. So
as soon as I saw, like, the chapter name is about, like, burnt cookies, I just put the book down for, like, a half hour, and I was like, I need to, like, ready myself for this scene again, because it's just so sad.
Yeah, so it's called My Cookies Get Scorched. And so this is immediately after he does the travel with Miss O'Leary. He says, I don't recommend shadow travel if you're scared of the dark. Cold shivers up your spine, strange noises, going so fast you feel like your face is peeling off. Mm-hmm. But yeah, they end up in Connecticut. Nico did his own little shadow travel separately, and Percy notices him staggering up and is like, whoa, are you okay? And asks him how he figured it out. He says, practice, a few times running into walls, a few accidental trips to China. It's just kind of funny to think of him, like, chasing a shadow that's, like, towards a wall and then just, like, boom.
Boom.
Yep. Imagine a 10, like, and people would just be like, that 10-year-old's a little weird.
Mm-hmm.
Or, like, 11 or 12, whatever he is here.
Like, a kid just shows up and immediately just, like, runs right into a wall and falls over.
So, they finally end up at Luke's house. So, first thing they notice is, before they even reach the front door, the sidewalk was lined with little stuffed beanbag animals from gift shops. There were miniature lions, pigs, dragons, hydras, even a teeny minotaur in a little minotaur diaper. Judging from their sad shape, the beanbag creatures had been sitting out there a long time, since the snow had melted last spring at least.
Beanie babies.
Yeah, a hydra one at that, and one of the hydras had a tree sapling sprouting from between its necks. There's also a bunch of wind chimes. Um, let's see. And he says it's enough that it makes him feel like he has to pee because of all the tinkling noises. Um, there is a plaque painted on the front door that says Castellan in English, but below it, I don't even know if I want to try to say this. Diocetes Fro Froryu, um, something like that. Anyways, commander of fortresses, which is, I looked it up, and it's funny because you Google something and other people have Googled it. They're like, why would it say Castellan and then commander of fortresses under it? And it's like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, because that's what Castellan means. So it's literally just a Greek translation of the meaning of Castellan.
Mm-hmm.
And let's see. So they go inside. Luke's mom. It says she looked like a lady who enjoyed sticking her finger in electrical sockets. So of course that puts in mind a very frizzy hair picture. White hair stuck out in tufts all over her head. Pink headdress was covered in scorch marks and smears of ash. Her face looked unnaturally stretched, and the high voltage light in her eyes made me wonder if she was blind. So she hugs both Nico and Percy and says, Luke, you're back. Like, because at first Percy's like, wait, Nico looks nothing like Luke. And then she hugs Percy as well, and he's like, whoa, okay.
Mm-hmm.
So that was his kind of first real sign of how bad it is.
Yeah.
I mean, other than, the outside appearance of the house.
Oh,
Um,
one thing too before they went in that I like that Rick put in was just Percy looking at Luke's house and being
mhm,
like, "This is a really nice house. Like I grew up in
yeah,
like really small like apartments that my mom couldn't afford." And he's like, "Why would he run away from this nice house?" And it's just like like I just like that because that's how poor people think. Is we
yeah,
see like nice houses like that and we're like, how could this possibly be that bad? And then when they leave, he's like, yeah, I see why Luke ran away now. But just like looking at it, you're like, oh, he grew up with like a house to live in, like the same house all the time, and didn't have to like worry about that he couldn't afford living, that his mom couldn't afford living there, and had like the same place to live, but like nothing else was stable the whole time.
yeah. Clearly, there's some sort of situation because she does not seem in any state to work, and she still has possession of this house.
Mm-hmm.
So you just have to imagine before she got this bad, it probably would have been a great place to live. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so when she's going and doing her hugging thing, they notice she smells like burnt cookies. She was as thin as a scarecrow, but that didn't stop her from almost crushing them. Um, let's see. Then Percy notices a framed picture on the mantle, and it is exactly the picture that Rachel drew.
Mm-hmm.
Um, let's see. Miss Castellan leads them in. She's like, "Oh, you guys are finally here. I made lunch already." Um, and Percy notices. So, first of all, around the house, taped up are different depictions of Hermes, whether they be from advertisements or like, um, it was like medical ads even.
Mm-hmm.
And then he notices there's a bunch of peanut butter sandwiches that are just sitting around. She keeps making them and sticking them in Tupperware.
Yeah.
And so there's ones that are at the bottom of the pile that are like moldy. And she's continuously baking cookies but burning them. Because, and then like also there was like discarded Kool-Aid. Um, and so when she says it, like they start asking her questions about Luke, even though she still is under the impression that both of them are Luke. Um, when did you last see him? Nico asked. He was so young when he left, she said wistfully. Third grade, that's too young to run away. He said he'd be back for lunch, and I waited. He likes peanut butter sandwiches and cookies and Kool-Aid. He'll be back for lunch very soon. Um, she looked at me and smiled. Why, Luke, there you are. You look so handsome. You have your father's eyes. So, um, yeah, like as they're asking her all these questions about Luke, she's like going basically in and out of reality. What happened to her eyes, because her eyes are having trouble focusing and stuff. Um, she says, "Why, Luke, you know the story. It was right before you were born, wasn't it? I'd always been special, able to see through the whatever they call it, the mist," I said. "Yes, dear. And they offered me an important job. That's how special I was." Um, what sort of job? What happened? Dear me, it didn't work out, did it? Your father warned me not to try it. He said it was too dangerous, but I had to. It was my destiny, and now I still can't get the images out of my head. Something that was too much for her.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Luke was so kind, Miss Castellan murmured. He left to protect me, you know. He said if he went away, the monsters wouldn't threaten me. Then I told him the monsters are no threat. They sit outside on the sidewalk all day, and they don't, and they never come in. She picked up a little stuffed Medusa from the windowsill. Do they, Mrs. Medusa? No, no threat at all, she beamed at me. I'm so glad you came home. I knew you weren't ashamed of me. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the stuffed animals, and especially them being like beastly, and you know, the hydras, the minotaur, the medusa, it's her way of trying to control the monsters, knowing that that's part of the reason that he left. Um, which like it's such another layer to it, that she's kind of convinced herself that they're real, and like, look, they're harmless, they're just sitting there. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
while they get rained on and snowed on, and like, you know, I'm from California, and a part of California that doesn't snow, so I've never seen what that looks like. I'm sure you have a better picture of like leaving something out for multiple snow and, you know, like in melting cycles looks like.
Yeah, it gets gross,
Yeah.
especially because whenever it melts, it gets like muddy, from all the water, and just snow is not like clean, you know? It's
Yeah.
dirty. And so it would get like the grass and mud and stuff like that, and leaves and things like that in it. Um, but yeah, it's just like really sad.
Hmm.
It's just really sad.
Yeah, and Nico's just trying to move this along. So Nico's the one that's tending to ask these questions. So the next question
Yeah.
he asks is, when did Luke visit you last? And they really only get a conception of when the last visit was, because Percy mentions something about his eyes being gold, and she's like, no, his eyes are blue, just like his dad's. And so Percy then realizes, okay, this had to have been before last summer, before Kronos took over his body.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then Nico asks, this is very important. Did he ask you for anything? And she says, my blessing. Isn't that sweet? He was going to a river and he said he needed my blessing. I gave it to him. Of course I did. And Nico wants to basically leave after this. He's like ready to get out. Um, but something happens to her when she starts this, and her eyes start glowing green. She starts saying in her, I'm gonna say prophecy voice, just because
Mm-hmm.
it's what I think of like, my child, she rasped in a much deeper voice, must protect him, Hermes. No, help my, not my child, not his fate, no. And so Nico's still trying to get out. Percy's like trying to figure out what's wrong with her. And she snaps out of it, says, goodness, I dropped the cookies. How silly of me. She says Hermes will be here soon. He'll want to see his boy, because she thinks both of them are Nika, or not, both of them are Luke.
Luke.
And see, she tried to stop us, to offer us Kool-Aid, but I had to get out of that house. On the front porch, she grabbed my wrist, and I almost jumped out of my skin. Luke, at least be safe. Promise me you'll be safe. I will, Mom. That made her smile. She released my wrist, and as she closed the front door, I could hear her talking to the candles. You hear that? He will be safe. I told you he will be. As the door shut, Nico and I ran. The little beanbag animals on the sidewalk seemed to grin at us as we passed. Um, Percy's so sweet for giving her that moment, at the very least.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff to like think about with this part. Um, One thing I thought of was her saying like I went too far and being like, yeah. And that's like Luke doing the same thing of going too far.
Hmm.
And she was even warned by Hermes, like, this is a bad idea. This isn't going to work. And she just wanted to do it anyway. And especially because she said, like, I wanted to be special. That's literally what he does. Of, I want to be, he wants to be special so badly. Um, and I think this, people talk about this scene in a way of like, they make comparisons to Percy and Sally, which makes sense. Percy even does that himself in a way that actually is okay, like in a way that makes sense to me, like why he would think about Sally in a different way of like, wow, my life would have been so much harder if I didn't have my mom. But it also is the thing that rereading this again, people talk about, they talk about her as if like, oh, if this never happened to her, then Luke just wouldn't have ended up the way that he did. I'm like, that's, you don't really know like what she would have really been like if this didn't happen to her. But it also is one of those things that this happened to her because she wanted so much to be like special with the gods. She wanted Hermes and the other gods to think how cool she was and things like that. That's why this even happened in the first place. And so that's something that he is doing too. And so it's not as easy as just, yeah, if she was a mom that was mentally okay and was there, then he wouldn't have, but he might have been even more like begging for like chaos and attention from the gods because that's what she wants. And it's one of those things of, I feel like no matter what, she would have done something like this that would have gone too far because of how much she wanted to be like special and different than even other people that can see through the mist and stuff. And it's just, it's one of those things that people make it too simple of like, oh, if she was fine, then Luke would have been like Percy and everything would have been okay. And it's like, not necessarily, because the reason why this happened in the first place is still there. And she's like honest about it. And it does make me wonder because of how Luke talks about Hermes, like this is all Hermes' fault. He ruined my mom. He ruined her, just her brain. And he makes like comments about that when we read the Demigod Diary story. And when she was telling this story, it just made me wonder, like, did she tell him about how Hermes told her not to do it? And did he just not believe her? Or did she just not tell him that part?
I feel like it's one of those cases of because he has so much misconceptions over like the gods, he feels like, oh, he should have like literally stopped her.
Mm-hmm.
When like I would say even in Greek mythology, the same way as in, like Christian theology, um, the idea of free will still kind of exists. Like, yes, we're operating within a system of fate, but the gods don't intervene with like human will in like I don't know, not in very certain circumstances, right? They do,
Mm-hmm.
but they don't.
Yeah.
And so, like, this was a case of like I'm gonna let her hubris do its own work, unfortunately.
And it also is a thing of just, you can't control people.
Yeah.
And that's more what it feels like with Luke of thinking like, yeah, my dad should have just controlled her and made her stop.
Hmm.
But you can't, like, if somebody wants to do something, they're going to
Yeah.
do it even if you are there watching them all the time. That's not, they're going to do it. If they want to do it, they're going to do it. Um, there's a
I mean,
super
yeah.
there's a super
Luke's.
depressing thought about May, about the what happens in this book. That is something that I've kind of thought of ever since I read this book for the first time. I just try not to think about it too much,
Yeah.
which is just the main thing I'll say about that is just what what happens to her after everything gets fixed
Hmm.
with the like why she's like this. There's a reason why she's like this. They figure it out in the course of this book, and it gets fixed somewhere through this book. So like, what does she think
Yeah.
after she isn't like that anymore? because this was like a magical thing. And so she would just go back to herself, and that is honestly one of the things that I hold against Luke the most.
Yeah.
And particularly the fact that he's just left his mom in this condition for all of this time. That is just so wrong. It's
Yeah.
even if he is a kid, he's also not a kid anymore. The entire time that we've known Luke in this book series, he was 19. He's not a kid anymore. And it's also just the fact that like he knows that his mom is in this sort of state somewhere in their house. And he just like leaves her to be in this situation, like doesn't try to do anything to help her, like to have somebody come in to help her just to like clean up their house and then leave again. It's just really wrong. And like I will say that I feel like I can talk about this because my dad died from dementia, and obviously my dad was a horrible person, but he still died from dementia. And the couple years before he died, or before he went into a nursing home, was really hard because we were trying to get him into a nursing home, and because we knew he needed like around the clock care. Like my mom would come home and he would turn like the thermostat in their house up to like 85 degrees and not even realize and have no memory of doing it. He would go to bed at 4:30 p.m. every single night. He would like call and be like slurring and stuff his words so much that it was like impossible. Like we would have to like translate for other people that were around him because it was so hard to understand him. He was just super out of it. He couldn't take care of himself. He couldn't like do anything himself. He needed people around to do literally anything at all for him. And it was like that when he was at the nursing home too until he died. And somebody like that, you deserve somebody to be like taking, just making sure that he ate like every day and things like that. And so it's like leaving, like that's why I'm thinking about this, like seeing her act this way just reminds me a lot of how he was with how they like, especially how she like seems like aware of that this isn't real, that they're not really Luke, and then goes back to like the almost like the delusion kind of thing of, because it's easier to like pretend, and then it has moments of clarity and then goes back. Like that's kind of how it is with people like that. And it's just horrifying that he never did anything to try to take care of her, that he just left her there like that. And like in a house with like rotting food, and that just the idea that he showed up there and walked in, saw her house in that state, talked to her just to get permission to do the fucking Achilles curse, and then just like walks away and leaves and never goes back, never talks to her ever again, never thinks about her again, never does like anything with her again, and just leaves her like that. And it's like, that's your mother. That's your mother. And you're just leaving her in that sort of state. Like, even if you hate your dad, that's your mom. And she didn't actually do any of this to you. Like, especially even how Luke feels about this. He doesn't think that May is the person that did this kind of thing to him. Like, yeah, you can understand being angry at her because of her being in that state. That is like one of the most frustrating things in the world when somebody is in that sort of place, is when they have those moments of clarity like she had a couple times, and you just like want them to like stay in that state all the time. It's so frustrating. You like want to believe that somehow they could somehow get better again, and that they could just go back to how they were, even though you know it's not going to happen. But you still like want it to, and every time they have those moments, you like get your hopes up, and then it just like doesn't work again, and you just get upset all over again. And so I can understand him feeling like that and that sort of thing, but it feels really horrible to think that he used her as a reason to be on this kamikaze murder path. And he has to know at this point that part of the reason why she is so scared is because she saw the things that he's doing right now. And that that doesn't make him stop, and he instead uses her as a like a reason, as an excuse to be doing these things to all these people, and then just goes back to get like to use her again to become invincible, and then just
Yeah.
leaves her in the dust, and thinks that his plan is going to happen where the entire world is going to like be rewritten by Kronos and he's going to be his right hand man.
Hmm.
And he just leaves his mother in that house with like rotting food, thinking every day, hoping that he's going to come back and talk to her again, and he never goes back.
I mean, it's his MO. It's like all the people he says he's doing this shit for are the people that he fucks over the worst. He poisons Dahlia, and like
Yeah.
that was another claim of like, oh look, you treat your kid so bad. Look what you did to her. Now let me poison her.
Yeah, what do you think is going to happen
Hmm.
to May if he was successful? She
Yeah.
would die. She would die. When I didn't know that the Mythomagic account was Becky, um, like, uh, like last, you know, the first couple months after season one aired,
Hmm.
I remember she posted then, but I didn't realize it was her at the time, saying like Rick and I can't think of another thing that would happen besides when things get fixed of what would happen to her. And it is just really sad to think like what she would realize, and she would just have to deal with that. Um, I don't know. This is just it's just horrible.
Yeah.
And it like when I read this scene, I was just like, this is crazy that Nico is in this scene just like, can we go?
Yeah.
And it's just like interrogating her and then immediately leaving. And I was like, child, stop.
Yeah.
Like wake up. Like what are you doing? Like this is Luke's mom. You're interrogating her like you're a police officer, and then just like leaving once you're done with her. Like she's a human being.
Hmm.
And she's like mentally ill, not necessarily because of her. She didn't know that what happened to her was going to happen, but still like she's left in a bad state. You don't just like barge into her house, think that she's talking to her son that's never come home for all this time really, and then just like leave her like that. I was really glad that Percy was also there because he was actually affected by everything that he saw and was just like, "Oh my god, like what do I this is why I was mad when I read this part, realizing that this was all from like Nico pushing him to do this stuff. That I was just
Yeah.
like, I'm not really sure that Percy really needed to experience this exactly.
Yeah, so when I came back to the fandom, I didn't get all the love for Nico until I was like, oh, there's more books, there's stuff added onto his story. Okay, I can get with that, right? But I don't know. I didn't remember him being such a character that like I was totally into when I read these first five. Um, but yeah, anyways, they leave May's house, and they had thought they were going to be stuck there for a second because Miss O'Leary, having done the shadow travel thing, she needs her nap. She's super tired from doing it. And
Mm-hmm.
so they thought they were going to end up hanging out in Connecticut for a while. But it turns out that they see a little girl outside. Miss O'Leary actually found this little girl. It's an 8-year-old girl sitting around a campfire. Mousy brown hair, simple brown dress. She wore a scarf over her head, so she looked like a pioneer kid, like a little ghost of Little House on the Prairie or something. And let's see, eyes as red as the firelight. And it takes a second for Percy to find out who she is. First, she conjures up food. She's like, let me just make you guys this amazing spread. And it's like literally the most comforting comfort foods ever. So she makes them roast beef, baked potatoes, buttered carrots, fresh bread, And Percy says a whole bunch of other foods I haven't had in a while, so think nostalgia.
Mm-hmm.
Um, he drops his portion into the flames that she's sitting in front of. And that's when she's like, "Thank you. You've been giving me a portion every time you do that, by the way." And he says, "I recognize you. The first time I came to camp, you were sitting by the fire in the middle of the commons area." She says, "You did not stop to talk. Alas, most never do. Nico talked to me. He was the first in many years." Um, I thought that that was interesting because we we talked a little bit about this at the time, and I feel like it's come up in our content at least, maybe not
Mm-hmm.
necessarily on the pod. But the whole thing with Nico in his very brief moment at camp was that he really didn't take to many people. And
Mm-hmm.
so for him to see, she appears as an 8-year-old girl, he was 10 at the time,
Mm-hmm.
like a girl that's about the same age, close enough in age anyway, sitting by herself. That's the person he went to and actually talked to. Like
Mm-hmm.
there's something kind of sweet about that, I will
Yeah.
say.
And Nico would like, another kid, somebody who isn't like making a whole lot of noise. He's not somebody that really likes that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Um, so it makes sense that he would talk to her.
Yeah, so Percy then recognizes you're Hestia, goddess of the hearth. And so she's one of those goddesses that does, like, her mythology is pretty much non existent. Like, her duties are named, and that's about it. But because it's like when you think about what her duties are, she resides in the home, she resides in the palace of the gods. Like, she's
Mm-hmm.
both ever present and not at the same time. But there's something about her that's just so like definite that there doesn't need to be these dramatic stories of her.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and so here's the other thing too, because she brings this up, is she brings up this story of I gave up my godhood for Dionysus so that he could be an Olympian. There's not a classical source for that. And um, it turns out there was, I remember the author's last name, I can't remember if it was Richard or Robert Graves, but somebody who wrote a collection of mythology and tried to fill in some bubbles himself. He is who people usually attribute this idea to.
Mm-hmm.
And it comes from the fact that sometimes when people name the 12 gods, they say Hestia and sometimes they say Dionysus.
Okay.
Um, it was mostly just a like, okay, well, what's the logical reason? Well, maybe she gave up her godhood for him. Um, One of those trying to make sense of something that doesn't necessarily make sense type of things. And
Mm-hmm.
um, that was in the 50s, but for some reason, Rick's not the only one who picked up this myth about Hestia. Other people have tried to use it before. Um, Dionysus, from my understanding, he goes on his own little like set of trials and stuff to prove his divinity, but he's always divine. He came straight out of Zeus. I mean, I don't think you come straight out of Zeus and have to like trade up for your divinity.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But yeah, anyways, let's see. She starts talking to Percy, trying to instill in him this lesson, like using this myth that she gave up her divinity for Dionysus, that sometimes the best thing you can do is learn when to yield.
Mm-hmm.
Because Percy mentions, well, that threw everything off balance because now there's 7 male gods and 5 female gods, and she's like, okay, but that was the price of making sure that there was no violence. And um, I mean, the like one thing that is canon about Hestia that's kind of interesting is, at least in how it's listed in Hesiod's Theogony, she's the firstborn from Kronos and Rhea.
Mm-hmm.
And when they get regurgitated in reverse order, so she becomes the youngest in a
Mm-hmm.
way too. And I almost wonder if that's part of the like relenting. So, Zeus was the child that got chosen. He
Mm-hmm.
got to actually lead everybody, and she's like, you know what, fine, you take the realm. You take the helm, you be the oldest child. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I'll just sit back here and take care of everybody else.
Yeah. And I did like this part of just her popping up and being like, sometimes it's best to yield, and like everyone else has told Percy to the opposite. And so he says to her, like, you know, I'm not going to be a coward, or whatever he says, because he feels
Yeah.
like he's supposed to at this point. How could he not? Um, but it is just like one of those things of he does, because
Yeah.
that is more like what Percy actually would want to do. He's done that a lot already in the other books when things
I
feel
mean,
like
like
they're
Atlas, like the
yeah.
big, like him holding up to the sky, that was him doing it. Was
He
like, I'm
doesn't
not going to
kill
join this fight. It's better for Artemis to be in this fight.
yeah, like he doesn't kill Polyphemus
Yep.
in Sea of Monsters. There's he does that often, where things are when people are arguing, when things are bad, when things seem to be about to like go to a really bad place, he usually is the one to back off.
Hmm.
His whole thing with Annabeth is him literally like backing off every time she brings up Luke.
Yeah.
And so it's just he's always kind of he likes doing that. That's a more natural role for him.
Hmm.
But right now he's being told the opposite, and so it's like almost like reminding him of like why he is the one in this role, even if he
Yeah.
doesn't understand what that could possibly mean at this point. I just really appreciated this scene because, and he even says it himself during this part, that like it was nice for her to like show up and give us nice food and talk to us for a little bit to help him like process what just happened at Luke's mom's house, because he was
Yeah.
just like, what am I doing?
Yeah. And I mean, he even gets to ask her about it. So
Hmm.
he asks her for the backstory on May. She tells him he saw too much, and I thought Percy's reaction to it was pretty interesting because he says, "No wonder Luke ran away. I mean, it wasn't right to leave his mom like that, but still, he was just a kid. Hermes shouldn't have abandoned them."
Hmm.
Hestia responds, "It's easy to judge others, but will you follow Luke's path? Will you seek the same powers, meaning the Achilles curse?" And she's basically using this, like, use what you've learned about him to not follow his path, but Percy's like, but I kind of got to do the curse.
Yeah,
Hmm.
he doesn't want to, but it's like, well, what else am I going to do at this point?
Oops.
Um, but it is a like a I just like how she frames that whole thing
Yeah.
of she saw just like too much, don't go over the edge where you like can't come back basically. Because it would be pretty easy to do that with the Achilles curse, to just lose any sense of humanity.
Yeah. So Percy asks her, "Are you here to warn me against doing the curse?" And she says, "I am here because when all else fails, when all the other mighty gods have gone off to war, I am all that's left. Home, hearth, I am the last Olympian. You must remember me when you face your final decision." Um, but yeah, so we also find out while everybody else is out fighting, she's home in Olympus. She's literally the only one there. So
Mm-hmm.
she says, because I'm here, I'll like send you back to your own personal hearth. And then she like snaps Percy, Nico, and Miss O'Leary into Sally's apartment.
Mm-hmm.
And now we get some very sweet moments with Paul in this part.
Yeah.
Um, First of all, them freaking out because it's like, what is this big fur wall thing in our house? Hello?
Mm-hmm.
And then they finally settle in a spot where like Miss O'Leary's body is in one whole room and then her face is looking in at the rest of them having a conversation.
This is a
Um,
sweet image.
yeah. And this is when like so we find out that Percy has already told Paul about like I'm a demigod, this is what it means. But it didn't actually hit for him until this moment where he has a hellhound in his house, and then he's
Yeah.
like, "Oh, yeah, I mean, like I saw the hoof prints on my car, but like now this is big."
Mm-hmm.
And Percy, I thought this was a really funny exchange. Percy says, "Thanks for not freaking out," and he says, "Oh, I'm freaking out. I just think it's awesome."
Yeah. Like I'm definitely freaking out about how all this stuff is real, but like this is
Yeah.
also really cool.
Yeah, so Percy starts talking about all of the stuff he found out. So, like, the stuff with the Titans, and then the stuff with May Castellan and stuff. The stuff with his dream with Rachel. And so they basically end up getting down to, okay, the reason that we need you right now, Sally, is because we found out to do this curse thing, you have to give your blessing. It's important. This is absolutely necessary. Both times that has happened, which is Achilles and Luke, it's that has been a part of the process. And Sally is reluctant, of course, knowing it's risky. She's like, why would I say yes to that?
Mm-hmm.
And Percy and Paul exchange a look here. And that's where Paul's kind of like, it seems like Percy's trying to do something noble, though. And it's sweet. It's very sweet that he's like, let's just trust him. Can we just trust him?
Yeah, I liked
Yeah.
this part a lot in my extreme dad issues because Percy says at this part, like, people don't usually say nice things about me like that. And I was
Yeah,
like, yeah.
specifically what Paul says is, I can't claim to know what you and Percy have been going through all these years, but it sounds like Percy's doing something noble. I wish I had that much courage.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, that's when Percy starts like choking up,
Mm-hmm.
literally. Um, so Sally takes a second and then she says, Percy, I give you my blessing. Percy kind of remarks to himself, like, it doesn't feel like anything's different, but like, okay, we did the thing.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and oh, okay, this part was like, I know it's gonna come back up, and I don't remember how it comes back up. Percy, my mom said, one last thing. If if you survive this fight with Kronos, send me a sign. She rummaged through her purse and handed me her cell phone. And she's like, I'm not gonna take that. She says, I know, but just in case. If you're not able to call, maybe a sign that I can see from anywhere in Manhattan to let me know you're okay. Like Theseus, Paul suggested. He was supposed to raise white sails when he came home to Athens, except he forgot, Nico muttered, and his father jumped off his palace roof in despair. But other than that, it was a great idea.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, so they decide on something blue, and Sally's like, I promise I won't jump off any palaces. Like, yeah, so that's where we end. And um, I don't know, the contrast between this very sad scene with May and this very kind of cute scene with Sally and Paul at the end. It is nice that it doesn't have to end on the worst note, but
Mm-hmm.
it's still just like it's so much to take in these chapters with like the continual bringing up of Beckendorf and how large his death is.
Mm-hmm.
And then we have May Castellan now. We have Luke's tragic childhood coming up. And I do love that Percy acknowledges like it's shitty, the things that happened to him were shitty, but not in a way where it's like, and so I'm gonna stop fighting him.
Yeah. Yeah, like if this is kind of the thing that happens a lot with when you know people like this is
Hmm.
like every once in a while and like rarely but still you get like reminded that they were like a quote unquote normal person at a one point, like they were like a kid, that they were somebody young or like innocent, or they weren't always like this. And
Yeah.
it's always so weird whenever you have those like moments because you're just how the fuck did you end up like this? And that's kind of like where Percy is like he's only known Luke since he's already been in all of this stuff. He didn't know him before any of this stuff like Thalia and Annabeth did. And
Hmm.
so he's especially has seen like the absolute worst of Luke for the last like 5 years. And so to suddenly meet his mom like this and just see even that picture of him when he was little and to just see him looking more innocent and young, it just makes you be like, wow, they were like a normal kid before.
Hmm.
And like how did they end up in this place where they're how I know them? It just reminds you of like, wow, they're just like everybody else. They're not like this superhuman evil monster or something. They're just like me. And that is one of those things that I always make a point of that people always get mad at me about, which is just like every horrible abuser, like they don't, there's nothing like extra special about them. There's nothing like different about them that somehow makes them more horrible than anyone else. Everyone can make decisions. It depends on just how you live your life and like the decisions that you make, the people that you're around. But like really, it's just up to like that person. There's a lot of times where they can like make a different decision that could like change the course of their life. Quote that I always remember about with how Rick talked about Luke is that somebody asked, like, do you think that he would be redeemed basically in like the afterlife? Like, do you think he would live another life and make better decisions to like redeem himself? Or do you think that Luke was redeemed? And he basically said, like, I remember the answer, he said, I don't mean to sound religious when I say this kind of thing, but he basically said, like, it's really hard when you see people who could redeem themselves, but they just choose not to. And that's like how he looked at Luke, and that is true. There's a lot of times where he could have done that, but he just chose not to. And he was saying, like, you always hope that people eventually choose that path of redemption one day. And he said, that's when he said, like, I don't mean to sound like religious because it's not a religious thing at all. But I do believe that, you know, somewhere in the afterlife that anyone like that has the chance to heal and like actually deal with the things that they did when they were alive and learn not to do those things again. And so that's like what Rick says. That's very much how him and Becky talk about Luke, is that thing that he was a victim in the way that he didn't choose to be born into this situation. Mm-hmm. And he was. But everything else after that, like there's a certain point where when you're making the choices that he is, you have to acknowledge that he's choosing to do these things. And he could have chose not to. And that's really like the difference really between him and his mom and Percy and Sally, is that like Sally chose to let go of like control and said yes to something that she doesn't want Percy to do because she trusts her son. And like May was never able to do that. She couldn't like let go of control, of not being able to control like what's going to happen to her son to try to keep him safe. And her doing that made him way more unsafe than anything else she's ever done. And so if it's just, that is the thing that makes them different. It's not just like a fate thing, like, oh, Luke's fate was just always meant to be tragic. It didn't have to be. It ended up that way, but it didn't have to be. They could have chosen a different path.
We have chapters 7, 8, and 9 for next Monday. Hopefully, I'm gonna say they're hopefully not as intense, but I'm sure it's gonna keep going. It's gonna keep ramping up. The list of shit that's going down keeps adding. We got Thalia's gone, Grover's gone, Beckendorf is dead. They're about to go do the Achilles curse thing.
Yeah, they're gonna do the Achilles curse. Clarice refuses to fight. Selena, that whole thing is going to become a bigger thing very soon. It's just everything is like as like intense as it possibly could be.
Yeah, so we'll see what happens next. We'll be back for chapters 7, 8, and 9 on Monday. As always, if anything comes up in the meantime, you guys can comment, leave us messages, all of that stuff. And yeah, I think that's it. I'm not forgetting anything this time.